This week on Jerusalem Dateline, Israelis divided over the annexation issue. What will it mean to the people on the ground? And is it dividing God's land? Plus, an update on Turkey's attacks on the Yazidi people inside Iraq. And the miracle of Aliyah. Why some are saying Israel will see a dramatic increase of Jews coming back to the Promised Land in the years ahead. All this and more this week on Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. Around July 1st, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu plans to ask Israel's parliament to vote on the annexation of certain Jewish communities in the West Bank, Israel's biblical heartland. But what impact will this have on Israel, the U.S., and the people living in Judea and Samaria? We talked to some Middle East analysts about what they thought about the plan and its consequences. From the Middle East to Europe and across the Atlantic, world leaders are debating whether Israel can annex nearly one-third of the West Bank or Judea and Samaria. But David Parsons sees the term annexation as misleading, since Israel is not seizing land.
Because they are essentially just asserting their title to something that they already have a right and claim to. The international community recognized it 100 years ago at the San Remo Conference, 1920, the League of Nations mandate, 1922, that the Jewish people have a claim to this entire land.
President Trump's so-called deal of the century triggered the possible claim to the land.
What's interesting is that President Trump has said if the Palestinians won't come to the table right away, Israel can start the process of incorporating this 30%, up to 30%, into the modern sovereign state of Israel.
After meeting with advisors to both Netanyahu and alternate Prime Minister Benny Gantz, Joel Rosenberg says they don't see eye to eye on this issue.
When I sit with close advisors to Prime Minister Netanyahu, they make a very interesting case. They say, okay, Joel, why is this summer different from all other summers? We didn't pick this summer. The President of the United States is the first president in history to lay out a peace plan that allows us to have more territory in biblical lands than we ever have been offered by, nobody has ever offered us that. When you talk to the close advisors to Defense Minister, alternate Prime Minister Benny Gantz, they say, well, we support that, the idea, and we support the President's peace plan. However, is this the right moment?
Many leaders in Judea and Samaria are also divided. Some believe the current plan risks certain Jewish communities.
There are around 15 significant Israeli settlements that will probably be dried up. They will have to, it doesn't force them to leave, but they'll probably have to leave on their own because they don't see any future as a little enclave surrounded by a Palestinian state.
While the plan allows Israel to vote for sovereignty, it would also establish a Palestinian state under these conditions. The Palestinian Authority must recognize Israel as a Jewish state, renounce terrorism, stop incitement, and end payments to convicted terrorists.
Only then we start negotiations, which can lead up to 4 years. The American ambassador called it that the Palestinians will turn into Canadians. I prefer the biblical expression that wolves will turn into sheep, and then the reality will look completely different.
Some argue, while it's unlikely the PA will turn into sheep, the Bible warns against giving away land God promised to the Jewish people.
It's difficult to even explain it this way, but I've followed the pattern for 20 plus years, Chris, and this pattern fits that the God of Israel is not pleased about dividing Judea and Samaria for a future Palestinian state.
Koenig says he's witnessed more than a 20-year pattern where the U.S. reaps consequences when it forces Israel to give away its God-given land.
So I've been documenting what happens when the United States applies pressure on Israel to divide their covenant land. In my book, Eye to Eye, I documented 127 events through Hurricane Harvey that happened at the time or right at within the first 24 to 48 hours of U.S. pressure on Israel to divide their covenant land, starting with the perfect storm, going to 9/11, Hurricane Katrina, Hurricane Harvey, and unfortunately, life in America before January 28th, and then on January 28th, when the plan was delivered, and what has happened in America and around the world after January 28th, according to coronavirus, has been a very significant event. And it fits the eye-to-eye pattern that I've documented for 20 years.
Parsons explains the plan would also put many important Jewish and Christian archaeological sites under a future Palestinian state.
There are hundreds of other important Bible sites to Jews and Christians throughout all these areas that would probably be lost, and the Palestinian Authority already has a record of not being a real guardian, custodian of these sites. In fact, the record shows they try and erase it and replace it with their own Islamic narrative.
The issue deeply troubles the region, especially Israel's neighbor, Jordan.
So in some ways, the king of Jordan is like a man sitting on a volcano, surrounded by a forest fire, worried about an earthquake, that the earthquake could cause the volcano to blow. Could annexation by Israel of territory that's very disputed, very controversial, could that be the earthquake that causes Jordan to blow? I wrote a whole novel series about the potential of the Hashemite monarchy being overthrown. This is not something that we want to see. It would create enormous instability in this region.
Rosenberg, who has met with a number of Arab leaders, questions if this is the right time for annexation.
If you look at the Gulf states, I think they think this complicates their effort, their desire to move steadily towards peace with Israel.
He adds, most U.S. evangelicals aren't aware of the current Israeli sovereignty debate, given how COVID-19 and domestic turmoil dominates their attention. But he says it's an important time to pray.
Well, mainly for wisdom for Israel's leaders, and of course for peace. Israel is just coming out of the COVID crisis. It's handled it much better than many countries of our size, but it's still an issue. It goes back to the central question: why is this summer different from all other summers? How should Israel handle it?
Up next, an update on what some are calling an unprovoked aggression against one of the region's religious minorities. Here in the Middle East, just a few days ago, the Turkish Air Force bombed Sinjar, the capital of the Yazidi people, who suffered a genocide a few years ago at the hands of ISIS. CBN's Jennifer Wisher discussed this crisis with Nadine Mayenza, a member of the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom.
Yazidis who live in northern Iraq were nearly wiped out by ISIS 6 years ago and now fear returning to their homes in and around Sinjar because of aggressions by Turkey and others. U.S. Commissioner for International Religious Freedom, Nadine Mayenza, is here to help us understand some of the dynamics in the region. Thank you, Nadine. First, tell us what happened on Sunday.
Sure. On Sunday evening, Turkey commenced airstrikes on Sinjar in Iraq, and they did what they called Operation Claw Eagle. They named it, with over 81 airstrikes in this area of Sinjar, which is where the homeland for the Yazidi people, where they were victims of genocide in 2014. And in the same week these attacks happened, Yazidis were just starting to come back. They had about 200 families which had returned just a few days before these attacks. So it was very troubling to us as well as many others around the world.
It sounds like the timing there is suspect. Why does this latest move by Turkey matter so much?
Well, Turkey has been in a feud with the Kurdistan Workers' Party, or the PKK, for quite a long time, and they consider them terrorists, and they are accusing them of planning attacks, or at least that's what they're saying, from Sinjar. There's no proof that has been the case. There is the PKK present there, but these attacks to do 81 strikes in an area that is so poor, so desperate, with so few Yazidis having returned, and the ones that did return had to experience literally watching the Mount Sinjar on fire, was really troubling and really disturbing to them. We were told by I was told by Murad Ismail, a Yazidi leader, that about 700 families were living in a camp on Mount Sinjar, just 2 kilometers away from some of the strikes. And so putting their lives in danger, traumatizing them again. And it seemed as if they weren't trying to hit the targets, as they were trying to make a statement and to scare. Was it to keep the Yazidis from coming, or was it to make a point that they consider the PKK to be dangerous?
6 years ago, they were nearly wiped out by the Islamic State. What is their status right now?
Over 400,000 are still in camps in the Kurdistan region of northern Iraq, in Dohuk, and then some of them have also been able to immigrate away to other countries. And so there's been construction just starting to happen. There really is a need for self-governance in Iraq, for them to be able to build their own security forces and to build their own, have their own mayor, have their own governance, as the Christians also need, those Christian areas need the same thing. That would really help, I think, for long-term, for them to be able to have a community. ISIS went after them really the most and kidnapped over 6,000 of the women into sex slavery. 3,000 are still missing.
I know you have been tweeting about this. What is the Commission's take on Turkey's actions?
That Turkey should not be going after religious minorities either in Iraq or in Syria. And that when they do, we're going to call them out.
Commissioner Mayenza, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Coming up, why the miracle of Aliyah may be on the rise dramatically in the years ahead. Israel's Minister of Aliyah and Immigration says that in the next 18 months, as many as 90,000 new immigrants will come here to Israel. Tom Hess, the founder of the Jerusalem House of Prayer for All Nations, just issued the 10th edition of his book called Let My People Go. Hess believes because of a number of factors, many of those new immigrants will come from North America. Here's our interview from the Mount of Olives. All right, Tom, thanks for joining us here on Jerusalem Dateline. Appreciate it very much.
It's a joy to be with you in Jerusalem Dateline.
Yeah. You have a passion for Aliyah. When did you first have that on your heart, and what did you do about it?
Actually, what happened in 1987, I was living in Washington, D.C. We had a house of prayer overlooking the Supreme Court in the Capitol, and I was praying, and the Lord took me into a trance, and He showed me 9/11. He showed me greater shakings coming on the United States, and He said that the Jewish people needed to be warned because their destiny was ultimately in Israel. And He said greater shakings would come.
So what are the main factors right now where you see increasing the potential of Aliyah?
One thing for sure is the pandemic. What happened, there were something like 300 Jews died in Israel. And they estimate maybe 10,000 in the US and in Europe. So the population is almost the same here as it is outside. So 30 times more Jews died in the pandemic. Also, people realize that there's a much better health system in Israel. The Jewish people, they feel they're being cared for much better here. So there's so many different things. Anti-Semitism is rising so much outside. Also, even the birth rate here is 3.5, and families are healthier here. So there's many different dynamics that are happening that people realize that this is their home. For the first time, probably since Israel was reborn, many Jews in the United States think that it's better to live in Israel than it is in the U.S. They used to think they can live there and they can bless Israel from afar. But now they believe that it's time to come back to Israel because I think they see the ominous things that are happening. But I remember in 1986, we went to Russia and we did 7 Jericho marches for 7 years around the Kremlin, and 1.3 million Jews came back. What happened was that the former Soviet Union unraveled, and God allowed that to happen to bring 1.3 million Jews home. Then Russia went back up again. So I don't know. Right now, it seems like something ominous is happening, and I believe that this is maybe a last warning for the Jews to come back in good times, to be able to bring their finances back, find a home here, and to settle before things could shake even more in the United States of America.
What does Hosea say, and why is that so important?
In Hosea it says, when the lion roars, his people will come trembling from the west. So we know that the lion is roaring now over the United States of America. And it says, when the lion roars, his people will come trembling from the west. So we see that beginning to happen. They're estimating that next year, the number of people making Aliyah could more than double. People are talking about maybe 100,000 Jews coming back. I felt even before this pandemic that in the decade of the 2020s that there could be more than 1 million Jews come back. And so we saw that same thing from the former Soviet Union in the 80s. But that was the time of the North. Now is the time of the West. And this is the last major Aliyah because 80% of the Jews outside of Israel live actually in the United States of America, and about 95% live in the Western world. And these are the areas that are being shaken the most by the pandemic. Maybe God is showing something that it's time for his people to come home. Because normally he works through the fishers, and if people do not respond to the fishers, he allows the hunters to rise. We hate anti-Semitism, but we know that many of the Jews from around the world came back because of uncomfortable circumstances. Anti-Semitism in the nations was the key that brought them back.
How would you encourage people to be praying about this right now?
I think that Christians should pray that God will open the gates of their cities, open the gates of their nations, and that the Jewish people will be able to come back to Israel, that they would break open the gates through intercession. And we need to pray also that God will bring a big breakthrough to bring them back before it gets much worse in the United States of America. So I believe the 2020s will be the roaring 20s because the Lion of the tribe of Judah is roaring from the west, and they will come trembling from the west. May they come back sooner than later, because this is the year of Aliyah. This, I believe, is the appointed time for the Jews to come back from the west, back to their homeland, Israel.
Well, Tom, thanks for your expertise and your passion about this very important topic. Thank you. Still ahead, an Israeli startup that hopes to provide air free from the coronavirus. As the world looks for a safe reopening from the COVID shutdowns, an Israeli startup believes it holds a key by providing one of the things needed most, clean air. CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl has that story.
3 years ago, Aviad Schneiderman and his brother decided to take their father's heating and air conditioning business into high-tech air quality. Now Schneiderman is CEO of Aura Air.
Our product is a one-stop shop. It's a full solution for indoor air quality, from detection, analyzing, and providing you purifier and disinfecting the air. Aura is a solution for any indoor environment, from your house to your office space, hotels, automotive industry, buses, trains, any indoor environment that you can think of. We are the best solution for that.
Even before COVID-19, Israel's Sheba Medical Center used Aura Air, which touts it can filter out most particles from allergens to dust to viruses and bacteria.
Sheba used this product because in hospital we have a lot of infections problems. And once you can give an information and also know how to attack those three vehicles, the particles, gases, and humidity in the air, you can reduce it significantly.
Now they're studying its effectiveness against the coronavirus.
There's amazing performance. We can filter the air in very high resolution, but also disinfect it. We already proved that on different viruses, on different types of flu viruses. And nowadays, we are testing it on the COVID as well.
Schneiderman explains how it works.
You have the pre-filter to filter big particles. Then you have our main filter that have those three layers, the layers of the HEPA, carbon, and copper. With that, you have a UVC light that can burn and destroy the bacteria in the air while getting to the product. And lastly, the sterilizer that generate the positive and negative ions in the room.
The filter system is controlled by an app whose air quality assistant is named Heidi.
You're getting the recommendation of Heidi. As we personalize the product for you, you control all the devices from one app. You have your locations, and inside of each and every product, you can see the air quality outside, the air quality inside, a summary of it, exactly what is the situation. So you can set if you have any problems of allergies or asthma, you can see your own recommendation. And lastly, you're going to get also the weather forecast.
They're also working on a portable device that can provide a 30-foot protective bubble around you.
The Aura Mini is a device that you can have your self-protection. There's part of the technology inside of it, and with that, we can give you a safe area, safe zone around you. You can use it while you're walking in the street or even sitting in coffee or driving the bus or the subway.
Schneiderman says that interest in Aura Air is growing worldwide since the outbreak of the coronavirus. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Well, that's it for this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Thanks for joining us. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time.